Hello friends, welcome to my channel. I want to say a very big thank you to my returning subscribers, and if you are new to this channel, I want to say thank you for clicking on this video, and please do not forget to join this wonderful family by hitting the subscribe button. In this channel, I bring you fashion DIYs from dressmaking, bag making and fashion accessories. So in today's tutorial, I'm going to be sharing with you how I made this beautiful panel dress using different African prints. You can actually use plain fabrics, it doesn't have to be African prints. So if you are interested in learning how I made this beautiful dress, keep watching this video and let's get started with the tutorial. These are the materials I'm going to be using to make this beautiful dress. I have 6 different African prints here. So you don't have to use African prints, you can use different plain materials. You can combine your African prints with plain material or even lace. So this is one style that brings out your creativity. So just try and play around with it and bring out the beauty in it. And I have this lace. I'll be using this for just the sleeve. I'll be using this for just the sleeves, and I also have my lining. So I'm just going to keep all these aside and let's get started. So the first thing I'm going to do is to draft out my basic bodies for my dress. So this is my gown basic bodies. So just go ahead and draft your basic bodies according to your measurements and add all the allowances you need to add. So I'm going to use this to cut out my back bodies. So we don't have any combination at the back, so this is going to be for the back bodies. So I'm going to use this is my basic bodies on fold. I'm going to use it to cut my back bodies before making the alteration to cut out the front. So after using my basic bodies to cut out my back bodies, I'm just going to keep this aside. So after using your pattern to cut out your back bodies, so at this point you can just choose any kind of neckline you want for your dress. So I'm just going to create my neckline and continue. Using your pattern to cut out your back bodies, we're just going to open up our pattern. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to divide my armhole. I'll come to the center of my armhole and mark, and I'm going to repeat the same thing here. So after that, I'll come down to my hip point. My hip point is at 23 inches. So after my hip point, I'm going to bring my tape down to 3 inches after my hip point. So I'm going to be connecting this point to this point. So just use your ruler to connect from this point to this point. So please use your ruler. My ruler is not as long as this. That is why I'm using my tape. So I'm going to connect from this point so this is the middle of my armhole. This is my hip point. My hip point is at 23 inches and I came down by 3 inches. So I'm going to connect this point to this point. So I'll come to the second armhole where I marked the other point, and I'm going to connect it to this line. So after connecting this point to this point, I'll come back to this point and I'm going to come up by 10 inches. this point, and I'm going to go in by 9 inches. So I'll be connecting this point to this point. After connecting this point to this point, I'll come back to this shoulder and mark my waist measurement. From my shoulder to my waist is 15 inches, so I'm going to mark my 15 inches from my shoulder measurement, and I'm going to connect this point to this line. So after marking this out, I'll just go ahead and label the whole part. So I'm going to label this number 1, I'm going to label this number 2, I'm going to label this number 3, I'm going to label this number 4, and I'm going to label this number 5. After labeling, I'll go ahead and cut out my pieces. So after cutting them into pieces, please remember this numbering is very, very important. So after cutting them into pieces, I'm going to be picking them one after the other, place them on my fabric and cut out. So I'm going to pick number 1 first and place it on the fabric on where I want this part to be. After placing your first panel on your fabric, please hold it down with a pin. So I'll be using this panel to cut on my fabric, leaving about ½ inch sewing allowance on the corners. So this is my joining allowance. I'll go ahead and cut this out. I'm going to pick my number 2 and pin it to my fabric. So I'll be adding my ½ inch allowance all around this. My patterns to cut on my fabrics. So remember, I numbered them. That numbering is very, very important. And please, as you can see, I left ½ inch sewing allowance all around my pattern. I left ½ inch sewing allowance. So I'm going to rearrange this again according to the numbers. So I'm going to pick number 1 first. So this is my number 1. I'm going to place my number 1. And I'll pick my number 2. So this is number 1, number 2. So I'm going to get my number 3. I'll get my number 4, So this is my number 4. And this is my number 5. So number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to pick number 1 and number 2. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine. I'm going to sew my number 1 and number 2 together. I'm going to be joining it from this point. So before sewing, I have this little fabric cut out. What I have here is about 1.5 inch wide. So I'll take it to your ironing table and bend it into 2 like this and iron. So I'm going to be putting this in between this to sew. So I'm just going to remove this pin for number 1 and number 2. So just pick number 1 and number 2 first. Take it to your sewing machine. So I'm going to place this like this, and I'll be sewing it in between this. So by the time I open it up, I'm going to have something like this. I'm going to have this design showing, little of it showing outside like this. So I've sewn my number 1 and number 2 together. Remember this, I added it in between the sewing allowance. So just for the extra beauty. So this is number 1 and this is number 2. So I'll go to number 3 and number 4. So this is my number 3 and number 4. So I'll take this to my sewing machine and sew this together. I'm also going to place this in between my allowance and sew together. So after sewing number 3 and number 4 together, so I sewed number 1 and 2 separately, number 3 and 4 separately. So now I have number 5 left. So I'm going to pick my number 5 and I'm going to join my number 5 to my number 3 and 4. So this is my number 5. I'm going to take this to my sewing machine and sew together at this point. So I've sewn my number 3, 4 and 5 together. So we still have our number 1 and 2 still separate. So this is the last part. I'm going to take this and sew to the others. Wow, so this is what we have. This is looking so lovely. Let me know what you think about this tutorial in the comment section. And if you've watched this video to this point, I believe you like what you are seeing. Why not just hit the subscribe button if you've not subscribed to this channel, and give this video a thumbs up for more beautiful fashion DIYs like this. So I want to explain something on this part. This is where most people get confused. Bringing these patterns together looks confusing. So what I would advise, while your pattern is still together, like this, so let me rearrange this. So let's assume we've not cut out this paper. So in order not to get confused while bringing your fabrics together, when you still have this intact like this, go ahead and take a picture of this. So as you are joining them, you'll be working with the picture, you understand what I'm saying, before cutting together, so you don't get confused, because joining these pieces sometimes can be confusing. So why not take a picture of your pattern before cutting, so as you are sewing, you just be working with the pattern one after the other. So this is what we have, looking very beautiful. This is a very free dress. It doesn't have that, and it doesn't have zipper. It's a very free dress. It's a shift dress. So this is the back part of my gown. So this is the back. I'm going to place it on the front like this to see if there's any excess, because the back and the front are of the same measurement. So because of the allowance that we add in the front while we are doing our alteration, we might have a little difference, but I can't see any more difference here. So I'm just going to trim off the excess allowance I have with my back pattern. So because I need the front and the back to be equal. At this point, you can make any neckline of your choice. You can make your neckline lower than this. You can make it a cano neck, you can make it a V neck or a round neck. So I'll just go ahead and add lining to this. So at this point, I'm going to add my lining and my sleeve. So if you're not adding, I would like to use my lining to cover up all this sewing. But if you're not using lining for yours, you can just take this to your interlocking machine and interlock all these edges that we sewn together. But I want this to look really beautiful. I want the outcome to be really beautiful. So I'm going to be adding lining to mine. So what the next thing you're going to do, just go ahead, if you're adding lining to yours, go ahead, add your lining. After adding your lining, then you're going to join the front and the back together. You're going to join the front and the back together. After joining the front and the back together, you can add any sleeve of your choice. So I'm going to be using this as my sleeve. I'm going to be using this lace to make sleeve on my dress. So I'm going to be making a slash and spread sleeve. So if you want to know how to make slash and spread sleeve, keep on watching this video. So I've added my lining to my dress and I've sewn the front and back together. I've joined the two sides. So this is the back of my dress and this is the front of my dress, looking so beautiful. So the next thing to do is to attach the sleeves. I'll be using this lace fabric to make my sleeve. I'm going to be cutting the two sleeves at once. So I'm going to fold my lace like this. I'll fold into two and fold into two again. So I want to get the two sleeves at once. So to make my slash and spread sleeve, I'm going to be needing my basic sleeve pattern. So this is just a pattern for my basic sleeve. So let's assume this is on fold. So after cutting out your basic sleeve, I'm going to be making some lines on my basic sleeve like so. So I'm not going to cut this to the end. So I'm going to place this on my lace fabric and spread it. I'm not going to spread it so much. I don't have enough of this lace. So I'm just going to spread it a little. If you have enough material, you can go ahead and spread it very well. The more you spread it, the more fullness you are going to have on your sleeve. So I'm just going to work with what I have. So I'll just go ahead and cut this out. After cutting out my sleeve, this is what it looks like. I'm going to cut another long strip of about 1.5 inch wide, and I'll be using it to pipe the bottom of my sleeve. So I've prepared my sleeves. So the next thing I'm going to do is to attach my sleeves to my dress. So guys, this is all for this tutorial. You can see our dress looking beautiful. I later added pocket to my dress, so you can add pocket to yours, or you can leave it just the way it is. So what do you think about this tutorial? Let me know about it in the comment section. Do not forget to give this video a thumbs up. Subscribe for more beautiful DIYs like this. Thank you, and see you in our next tutorial. Bye.